What's going on, YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. Today's video is the best quarterback and wide receiver duos headed into the college football season. And this is in no order. This is just 5 duos that I chose to put in part 1. This will probably be a 2 or 3 part series. So we'll have about 15 duos, 15 of the best quarterback wide receiver duos in the country. And without further ado, let's get right into it. First up, we have Cade Klubnik and Antonio Williams from Clemson. These two guys last year really came onto the scene in a big way. The expectations were obviously very high for Cade Klubnik. He was a former 5-star recruit, taking over the program, and Antonio Williams really stepped up as his #1 target. In that playoff game against Texas, we really saw this connection in a big way. Not only does Cade have Antonio Williams, but he also has TJ Moore and Brian Wesco, and those two are really dynamic receivers as well. But Antonio Williams had the best season of all the three. As you can see, he had 75 receptions for 904 yards and 11 touchdowns last year. And Cade threw for 3,639 yards with 36 touchdowns. He also ran for 463 yards and 7 touchdowns. I think Cade is an underrated quarterback. I think he had a really good season last year, and the expectations were very high, and I still think he went under the radar. Now, headed into this year, I think this is the best Clemson offense in terms of roster-wise since Trevor Lawrence was there. They've recruited the position very well at wide receiver, and we're starting to see that pay off. In Williams, I expect him to go over 1,000 yards this year. He's probably going to have 70 plus catches again, so this is definitely a duo to keep your eye out for. Next up, we have Arch Manning and Ryan Wingo of Texas. Now, obviously, the hype for Arch Manning's off the charts this year. Quinn Ewers is moving on to the NFL. It's finally time to see what Arch is made of. Now, obviously, his stats from last year aren't going to be the best, as he was the backup. He played just a few games. He threw for 939 yards and 9 touchdowns. He also ran for 108 on the ground and 4 touchdowns as well. And Wingo, he had 29 catches for 472 yards and 2 touchdowns with 100 rushing yards. Now, you're probably asking why Ryan Wingo's on this list with only 400 yards last year. Well, he was a true freshman, a former 5-star coming out of high school as well, just like Arch. And he's going to be the man next year. He wasn't the #1 receiver this year, and he played meaningful snaps. And for a true freshman, that's pretty impressive. And headed into this year, you can almost guarantee if he stays healthy, he's going to put up 50 plus catches and probably get close to 1,000 yards. And being an outside wide receiver in Texas offense, we've seen over the past several seasons what those guys can do, especially with Sark calling the plays. And Arch is going to have the ability to stretch the field, throwing it deep to these guys. He's also throwing to DeAndre Moore, who's a dynamic receiver who can play both inside and outside. So it's not just Ryan Wingo out there, which I think is only going to help Ryan Wingo be the best receiver he can be. Next up, we have Julian Sayin and Jeremiah Smith. Now, this goes without saying, Jeremiah Smith, he's probably the best receiver in college football. He probably was the best receiver last year, and the expectations are rightfully so off the charts. I mean, he put up 1,315 yards last year with 76 catches and 15 touchdowns. Now, those numbers would be great for any receiver, let alone a true freshman. Smith would probably be the #1 draft pick, or at least the top 3 pick in the draft if he was eligible this year. He would no doubt be the #1 receiver taken. And for the next 2 years, he's the best wide receiver in college football. So Jeremiah Smith being the best receiver, you know I had to put this duo on the list. Even though Julian Sayin has not played any meaningful snaps, the kid's very talented. He was a 5-star in the last year's class. He committed to Alabama, and he flipped when Nick Saban retired, and he came to Ohio State. I think that was a very good decision for him, as he's not only throwing to Jeremiah Smith, but he's also throwing to Carnell Tate. So it's not like teams are just going to be able to bracket Jeremiah Smith, because if you do, Brendan Ennis, Carnell Tate, they have some other guys, Rogers in there as well, Graham. Like, those guys are going to hurt you, and Jeremiah Smith is going to have a lot of opportunity. Now, yes, Julian Sayin, he hasn't played, and it might take a while for this duo to gel, but once it does, there's no doubt it's going to be one of the best in college football. Next up, we have Sam Leavitt and Jordan Tyson. This is one of the more intriguing duos on this list, because Jordan Tyson got hurt last year, and they went to the playoffs without him. And we saw Sam Leavitt really put the team on his back, along with Cam Scadaboo. And headed into this year, the expectations for Leavitt are off the charts. He threw for 2,885 yards last year and 24 touchdowns. And he's also a very good runner, running for 443 yards and 5 touchdowns. And Jordan Tyson put up a crazy 75 catches, 1,100 yards, and 10 touchdowns himself. And I think Jordan Tyson was one of the more underrated receivers in college football last year. I think that most people talked about him was once he got injured and they realized the impact that he had on the team. Headed into this year, I don't think there is any way you can overlook him, especially knowing how important he was to the team last year, and the fact that he's going to be the #1 receiver in an offense that you have to expect to lead the Big 12 at this point in time. Now, for Sam Leavitt, yes, he's only entering his 2nd year as a starter, but people are talking about him as a Heisman candidate. Now, I'm not saying that is going to be the case, but if it is the case, Jordan Tyson, that means that he had an insane year, so I thought it was only right to put this duo on the list. Next up, we have Ty Simpson and Ryan Williams from Alabama. Now, much like the Ohio State duo that I posted with Julian Sain and Jeremiah Smith, I don't think there is a way you can leave this tandem off the list because of Ryan Williams. Now, yes, Ty Simpson, he's very much just like Arch and Julian Sain. He hasn't played much. He was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school, but he's thrown to a dynamic wide receiver number 1. In Ryan Williams, there's a case to be had that he's the second best wide receiver in the country, only behind Jeremiah Smith. He was a true freshman this year as well. 48 catches for 865 yards and 8 touchdowns. He also had 48 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns as well. He really splashed onto the scene against Georgia, if you remember. He had crazy highlight plays, and he was really a big part in them winning that game. Now, it kind of got overlooked towards the end of the season as teams kind of caught on to him being like the only big threat out there at wide receiver, and the quarterback play wasn't that great for Alabama. Now, Ty Simpson has the ability to take that quarterback play to the next level. He is a good runner, but he can also throw the ball down the field very well. A big part in him being a 5-star recruit was how far along he was in his development early on, both running, creating on the run, and throwing the ball down the field. I expect big things from Ty Simpson. I think Alabama fans would say the same thing. And there's no way you could keep this duo off the list with the second best wide receiver in the country coming back for his sophomore season. Okay, that's going to do it for today's video, guys. Let me know down below what you guys think of the list and some other candidates that should be in part 2 and 3. Remember, this is not a rankings list. Those aren't the top 5, even though some of them are certainly near the top. Yeah, let me know what you guys think down below. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel before you head out, and I'll see you all in the next video.